Night with David Dimbleby.
The voting's almost done. The excitement of election night is about to begin. Hello and welcome to our election night spectacular. We promise to be fast, we promise to be accurate, and we promise to have some fun. All round me in this studio, in these galleries, are the experts who'll be counting and checking and analysing the results as they come in. Our star reporters are out in the country at the key counts. We've got our cameras at all the places that matter. At Sunderland South, where they're just having a final rehearsal of getting the boxes in, they plan to be the first to declare. At Portsmouth, Guildhall, where the postal ballots are being taken up the steps, postal ballots that can go in now, of course, ready to be counted along with the other votes. And at Enfield in London, a Tory target, the seat that Michael Portillo famously lost in 1997. With me here in the studio, the best in the business, Professor Anthony King of Essex University, and Andrew Marr, the BBC's political editor. What kind of a night are we in for, Andrew?
David, I will be very surprised if we don't have a night of surprises. I think there are going to be some extraordinary results tonight. I have never known an election where the party headquarters were as jittery about what's really going on out there in the country. I think we will see safe seats falling. I think we will see marginals obstinately refusing to wobble. I think it is going to be a thrilling evening.
And across the studio in his own bullring, Jeremy Paxman.
I was thinking of it more as a salon, actually, where during the course of the evening, various of the most distinguished figures of British politics will come sit on these chairs here and try to make sense of what's happening, secure in the knowledge that by the time the sun rises tomorrow morning, they may not have a job.
And up behind me there in the gallery, Fiona Bruce.
Yes, I'll be keeping you up to date with the events of the night as it progresses, the state of the parties, the votes as they come in, the key speeches, and those not-to-be-missed moments all the way through till tomorrow morning.
And, of course, no election night would be complete without the man who can make the most complex things seem clear. Peter Snow.
Good evening, officer. Yes, we're all ready for the excitement here. Now they're pushing the frontiers of technology right to the extreme to illustrate the results of this election and tell you what the whys and hows of the vote were. Right down the end of Downing Street there, waiting at the starting gate, the three party leaders will be watching their race for number 10 every inch of the way. Hang on, Mr. Blair, wait for the results.
Well, now, the first event of election night is the exit poll. It's our first clue to what's happened today in the voting. And this year we've joined forces with ITV for this poll. It's an NOP Mori poll. We've spoken to over 16,000 voters at 120 polling stations at huge expense, out of 146,000 or so, 46,000 I think it is, polling stations. So what credence are we going to give to this when it comes through in just a moment?
The exit poll is an absolutely fascinating clue, no question, but it's no more than that. Usually the clue is right, but famously in 1992 it was completely wrong. The exit poll said a Labour government, the voters said a Tory government.
As Big Ben strikes 10, the polling stations will close. It will be too late to vote. And I can give you the result of our exit poll, which is this election has been won by Labour, but with a majority down from 160 to 66. The Conservatives are on 209. That's a gain of around 44 seats. A disappointing night if the poll is right for the Liberal Democrats. They're on 53, they gain around 2 seats. So there is the exit poll. What do you make of it, Andrew?
Well, If it's anything like that, it's a lot worse for the Labour Party than most people have assumed, and there will be a lot of gnashing of teeth inside the Labour Party and a lot of turbulence inside the party as well, if that's the case. If, of course, at this stage, I'm already getting reports that Wirral West, which is number 72 on the Tory target list, is incredibly close. Television presenter Esther McVeigh standing for the Tories there. So my earlier assumption that it was going to be an interesting night looks like it's going to be accurate.
Because you said it would be a result that was different everywhere. In other words, all sorts of parts of the country would give make a different
And
decision.
I still think that's going to be the case. I think we will see seats way down the notional target list for the Tories that they will take, and I think we will see some seats that they, inverted commas, ought to take that they won't.
Peter, can we have a look at how it seems to you, this exit poll?
Right you are, David. Yes, well, NOP and Morris spoke to people after they'd actually voted in 120 polling stations up and down the country, right from the top of Scotland, right the way down to the foot of Cornwall, something like 15,000 people altogether. And here's what they came up with. And do let's remember, as everybody said so far, this is a poll, an exit poll. Here we have, then, the share of the vote in our poll, as suggested by the people we spoke to. Labour on 37%. A little bit down on many of the polls during the campaign. 33% the Conservatives, right where they were at the last election, much where they were in many of the polls during the campaign. 22% the Liberal Democrats, showing not much sign of the leap that some people thought they might have taken in the polls. And the others on 8%. Now, the changes that those figures represent on the general election last time, remember, all these figures could be up or down a little. Bear in mind there's a margin of error of some 2-3%. The Labour Party, down by 5% on the 2001 general election. The Tories, no change at all. So what you've got there is a 2.5% swing from Labour to the Conservatives. 3% up the Liberal Democrats on their position in the 2001 election, and 2% up the others. Right, now our experts have got their computers whirring, and we've worked out what the shape of Parliament would be like on the basis of those shares, and we've done a great deal of analysis. Here I am standing on the government benches. I'm walking down now onto the floor of the House, and here is what we think will happen. First of all, the Tories over the other side there, the biggest opposition party, with 209, up something like 40 on where they were in the last Parliament, 45 or so, 44 seats. Next door to them, the Liberal Democrats on 53, up just 2 on where Charles Kennedy's party was last time when you allow for boundary changes. Next door to them, the others, Nationalists, Scotland, Wales, and in Northern Ireland. Now, over on this side of the House here we have the government benches, and there is the winning post of 324 any party needs for an overall majority. Labour now rushing towards it. There you go, right there. We're through it. They're through it, but not that comfortably. They're well through it. They've definitely got an overall majority. Let's just see exactly what we're forecasting it'll be down the end there. Labour majority of 66 altogether. And that will be a Labour government, indeed any government, elected with an overall majority on the lowest share of the national vote ever.
Well, Sunderland South is traditionally the first to declare. It was 43 minutes it took last time till the first result came in, which is the first test of our exit poll. Philippa Thomas is there. Philippa, how's it going at the moment? We can just see the first ballot boxes arriving.
That's the second ballot box that you've just seen come through. They are being run into Sunderland South by a team of sixth form students and inside leisure centre staff. Now, obviously, they're really running for the record books here, David. They are trying to get in here to declare first for the 4th time in a row. We've just seen the 3rd ballot box come in here now. And so they want to get into the record books. They've told me already that if they don't have all the boxes in by about 10 minutes past, then they think they might be in trouble. And there goes another one. They're looking for 31 ballot boxes to come in here for Sunderland South. They want to beat their previous declaration record of 43 minutes. So they tell me that they're trying to get the results here. They hope by 10:40. We hope that Sunderland South will be the first to declare.
Oh, Philippa, we'll be back with you later on. Thanks very much. Let's just have a look at this exit poll then that Peter Snow was just giving the details of. And Andrew, what would this mean for the Labour Party if its majority is down to 66?
Well, the first thing that we'd be asking is whether there was a Tony Blair majority. Would there be a majority for things like ID cards, compulsory ID cards, for some of the things that he wants to do to toughen up the welfare system, for further reforms in the health service and education using market systems? Looking at this kind of majority, there might well not be the reforms for those sorts of things that he would want to do.
We've just been joined, I come back to him, we've just been joined by John Prescott, the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party from his constituency in Hull. Mr. Prescott, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Have you got any news?
No, I haven't. I think it's a little difficult to tell what's happening around the country. I think what Andrew said before, it is going to be different in different parts, both in marginal and other areas. But what's clear, and has been all the time, Labour is going to be the next government.
Do you have any idea about turnout? Because we've had a report that Tony Blair's agent says that the Prime Minister's being a bit cagey about how many people have bothered to vote. What's your impression?
I haven't got an impression. It's too early to tell, and we haven't got our figures as yet. But those figures of turnout could suggest it one way or the other, quite frankly. It is just too difficult to call.
Not quite the result you were hoping for when you went into this election, then?
Well, we always want a good result. I always want to see a Labour government, and there is going to be a Labour government, there's no doubt about that. And, you know, compared to some of the majorities that governments have had in the post-war period, that's still quite even on those figures. And I'm a little suspicious that it will be as low as you're suggesting.
Well, of course, I mean, everybody is suspicious of exit polls. But if it's true, it would be the lowest share of popular vote that any government had had in time immemorial, which would be a bit disconcerting for Labour, wouldn't it? I mean, to have the majority but not the popular backing.
No, let's just wait and see. I wouldn't want to comment on that until we get some more accurate information.
What kind of campaign did you have, Mr. Prescott?
Well, I'd like to think it was a good one. It was going around over 85 constituencies, talking to over 100 of our candidates in the battlefield area. And the impression I got from them going around was that they were quite chipper about it. They knew there were difficulties, but they thought the difficulties were going to be more difficult than they were, frankly. But I don't know. There was uncertainty. Nobody spoke with any certainty whatsoever. We have to wait and see what the people have said.
The press reported you as being rather grumpy from time to time. Did you feel in a grump?
No, the press always call me grumpy. I was Mr. Grumpy in the Seven Dwarfs, and I've lived with it ever since.
You didn't hit anybody this time.
Oh, you have a wonderful political memory.
The Prime Minister says he's in for a full term. Are you in for a full term as Deputy Leader?
I'm in with a full term with Tony Blair. He makes the decision, and I'm the deputy. I'm delighted to have served with him and continue to do so.
And one last thing. Everybody says it was you who finally got Tony Blair and Gordon Brown to campaign together, and that was sort of, you know, after a week or so into the campaign. Is that true? Are you the person that bonds them?
No, I only served the meals.
Well, I won't make the old joke, Mr. Prescott, but thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
So, where were we? Yes, Tony King, you were about to say something.
I just want to reinforce something Andrew said a moment ago. Tony Blair never really endeared himself to much of the Labour Party. His purpose for the Labour Party was to win votes and to win elections. Well, he has indeed won another election, but on a much smaller scale than anybody was expecting if the exit poll is right. And I think that is going to damage, and I think Andrew is absolutely right about this, his standing in the party. He's no longer the magician he was. Incidentally, John Prescott was quite right. This is by post-war standards a perfectly healthy majority. Margaret Thatcher, having won the 1997 election, had a majority of 44. This would be half again as large. Considered historically, it's not a bad performance if the poll is right, but in the present context, it doesn't look good.
Let's just have a look around and see how people are getting on with the count. There we are in Folkestone. Those, I suspect, are postal ballots that are on the table there. The tellers are traditionally bank clerks or civil servants in local government. And the postal ballots, of course, are not counted until after 10 o'clock tonight, but they're there waiting. That's Folkestone and Putney. And Putney is a seat that the Tories are hoping to take back. They lost it when David Miller lost it in 1997. And there were those famous scenes with James Goldsmith heckling David Miller at the count, shouting, "Out, out, out." Well, Tony Coleman has held it, the creator of Top Shop, and the Tories are confident of that. Well, it's one of the key London seats that if they're going to make a bit of a comeback, they've got to succeed in tonight. And then Torbay, held by the Liberal Democrats, the Tories hoping to come in here and get it. Torbay tends to be a rather fast counter to an early declarer. It was Tory for years and years and years and years until it was won by the Liberal Democrats in 1997. And so they're speeding on there. And UKIP are standing there, so we'll see what happens. And Llanelli in Wales. And they're well ahead in Llanelli. I don't expect it to be a very early count, currently held by Labour. Labour stronghold with Plaid Cymru challenging. It's number 2 in their targets. Plaid Cymru, the Welsh Nationalist, or the Welsh National Party, I should call it. And Livingston in Scotland. Robin Cook's seat, the man who left the government over the Iraq War, which appeared to play such a large part in this campaign, that we shall discover later on tonight whether voters were genuinely influenced by it and whether it's had an effect on the outcome. Well, on that note, while we wait for the first result to come in, and it's only 11 minutes past 10, and we hope that Sunderland South deliver by around 10:40, I suppose, we join Jeremy. Jeremy.
Yes, well, I think we're joined now by Siming Campbell of the Liberal Democrats. Siming, what do you think? I mean, according to this opinion poll, you're not the real alternative at all, are you?
Well, let's wait until the votes are counted and we get final percentages. There was an English queen who had Callie engraved on her heart. All politicians should have 1992 engraved on their hearts because, of course, the exit polls proved us all to be wrong.
If this exit poll is as up the... I mean, it may be as up the spout as previous exit polls, but what are your own people telling you?
Well, our own people are telling us that in the target seats we've been going like a bomb, and there's a great deal of confidence. And that takes me on to my next point, which is I think there's going to be a great deal of regional variation throughout the United Kingdom, and that may be expressed in results which appear on the face of it to be contradictory of this exit poll, if indeed it is correct.
OK, well, we'll come back to you a bit later on. I think we're joined now by Liam Fox, the Conservative Party joint chairman. What do you make of this exit poll?
Well, it's another poll, isn't it? And we've had polls in the last few weeks that have been absolutely all over the place. I've also remember the 1992 exit poll which said that Neil Kinnock was going to be the Prime Minister. It didn't turn out that way, so we'll...
All right, we all agree they've been wrong plenty of times in the past, but what are your people telling you?
Well, we think that we fought a very energetic and a very focused, disciplined campaign.
A successful
campaign?
Probably the
most disciplined we fought for a very long time. Well, we'll wait and see, won't we? I know no more than you do at the present time. We've had our first box just arrived behind me here in my own constituency in Woodspring. This will be happening up and down the country. As the night unfolds, we'll be getting to see what the individual seats turn up. And I think that this is an election where the only 2 predictions I think I would make are there will be no uniform national swing and there will be no uniform regional swing. I think that we'll have to look at this on a constituency by constituency basis. I think it will be a long night, and I think we all should be taking it easy for the next few hours. I think we'll all be here well into the night before we see a clear pattern emerging.
All right, plenty of time to hear from you later. Thanks very much indeed. Well, with us here in the studio, our panel of Lord Faulkner, Anne Widdecombe, Shirley Williams, Baroness Williams, and Ian Hislop, the editor of Private Eye. Not very impressive, this result, is it, if the exit poll's right?
Everybody agrees we shouldn't pay too much attention to the exit poll. Let's wait and see what the final results are. What did the campaign tell us, though? I think it was pretty clear that we were batting on the economy and public services, and the Tories were talking about our hospitals were too dirty, there were too many immigrants. It was that sort of campaign that they ran.
I can't hear you. You're muttering something.
No, certainly were. Charlie said the Tories were saying our hospitals are dirty. I was simply saying, well, they are.
There you are. Exactly right. And it was a collection of whinges, which Anne is repeating as well. That's what their campaign was about. Not a coherent programme for government. And that came across very strongly.
A coherent programme for government, Charlie, is one in which you identify what needs addressing and then saying what you're going to do in order to address it. And therefore, obviously, you've got to identify what's wrong first before you say what you're going to put right.
And Shirley Williams, on the basis of this exit poll, I know you're going to say we shouldn't believe exit polls, but for the sake of argument, let's go along with it for the time being.
Well, I think...
an extra 2 seats.
Well, an extra 3%. But I think the thing about the exit poll indicates that this is a very disappointing result all round, really.
For everybody?
Yes, because it shows Labour down by 4. Well, I mean, think about it. Labour losing ground, the Conservatives staying exactly where they were after an attempt at an extremely well-financed and rather dramatic campaign. They haven't moved anybody, if the exit poll is right. We've gone up by 3%, which is something, but not as much as one might have heard. Let me see what the exit poll says. I mean, they're quite clear. +3 Liberal Democrat, -4 Labour, +1...
9 seats, we've certainly moved somebody, haven't we? In
fact, no,
we
do. The share of the popular vote is less than 1% up for the Tories.
I guess you would say, if the exit poll's right, it kind of reflects it's the sort of result that the campaign deserves, Ian Hislop.
Well, I don't know if it deserves. I was rather hoping the politicians have been quite dull in this election, so I was hoping the electorate were going to be rather interesting.
Well, they may well turn out to be very
Exactly.
interesting.
Let's hope the poll's wrong, because it's a boring result. I mean, it's good that the government has had a reverse, but it's not nearly enough for any excitement, nor has your party done anything, and the Conservatives have got a significant but not
gain,
terrific result.
We'll come back to you in a second.
Better than that.
Okay,
I think you've misread the figure, Shirley. I'm terribly sorry.
No.
All right. You can argue about the figures while David takes us elsewhere. David.
I'll come back when the argument's over. Margaret Beckett has just said that she has a horrid feeling, in her words, that immigration has helped the Conservative cause. And we've news from Wyre Forest. Remember that Wyre Forest, where the independent Richard Taylor saved the hospital, became one last time round? It's a very tight-run thing there, apparently, between him and the Tories. And on that note, we're still waiting for the first results to come through from Sunderland South. So let's go over to Philippa and see how close they are to it. Philippa, they've had 17 minutes now since the polls closed. How's it going?
We're going pretty well. We've had all 31 ballot boxes in for Sunderland South. I'm with the acting returning officer, Jed Fitzgerald. Do you think you're on course for a record-breaking count here?
Well, so far so good. Obviously, we've got to verify and do the actual physical counting and the reconciling and then ready to declare, so fingers crossed.
Now, by my stopwatch, all your ballot boxes were in at 12 minutes past. Was that a shade too late for you?
No, it's about right. We would have liked it another minute or so earlier, obviously, but it's probably indicative of a high turnout, which will take us a bit longer to process.
So you're still optimistic. And tell me about all the people counting here. They're special counters. Why?
Well, we've relied on a number of the same staff over the last few years, which is part of how we've built up the expertise that we have available to us. We draw from council staff, but also from bank tellers, from building society folk, and from
These are the people
office.
who can count banknotes very fast.
That's right, and they're used to handling paper and large volumes of paper very quickly, so that also helps.
And we also saw your teams of runners. We know they've been training, but tell us about what else you've done with the traffic lights.
Well, we work closely with the police and various other agencies to make sure that we can get through quickly but legally in terms of everything that we do to try and cut down a few seconds here and there.
You've also had a few thousand postal votes here. That meant you started counting in this hall on the dot of 10.
Yes.
You're hoping that'll speed you up?
We hope so. I mean, again, the percentage of postal voting is quite high, which also tends to indicate a high turnout. But we've been able to process those very quickly, as you say, right at the start of the count, rather than have to wait for them all to come in and be added into the ballot boxes as they've arrived.
And give me an estimate now. When are you going to declare?
When it's done.
You're not going to go any closer? You're not going to tell me it might be 10:40?
No, bottom line has got to be that we do it properly and fairly and equitably, and if that's by 10:40, so much the better.
Very diplomatic. Jed Fitzgerald, thanks very much for speaking to us here on the BBC. Well, that's it, Sunderland South. We have the stopwatch going. We'll see whether they can beat their previous record time of 43 minutes for the count.
Thanks very much, Philippa. Thank you. Well, a proper northeasterly caution there. Now, we're going to have the news in the rest of the country, apart from the election, and indeed the rest of the world, with the person who's going to be updating us through the night with the election events themselves. Fiona Bruce.
David, yes, and as you're hearing there with the BBC ITN exit poll predicting a sharply reduced majority for Labour, all the party leaders are anxiously awaiting the actual results. Earlier, Tony Blair was the first to cast his vote. He was accompanied by his wife Cherie and their 2 sons, who were voting for the first time. Later, Michael Howard cast his vote in Folkestone and Hythe, also accompanied by his family. Charles Kennedy and his wife Sarah cast their vote in Fort William in the Scottish Highlands. In the last few minutes, the Deputy Prime Minister, John Prescott, predicted a Labour victory, but stressed we're in the very early stages of the night.
Well, we always want a good result. I always want to see a Labour government, and there is going to be a Labour government, there's no doubt about that. And, you know, compared to some of the majorities that governments have had in the post-war period, that's still quite even on those figures. And I'm a little suspicious that it will be as low as you're suggesting.
Let me bring you some other news. The American Marine who shot dead 3 Iraqi prisoners as they lay wounded in a mosque last year will face no charges. One of the killings was filmed by an American news broadcaster, and the pictures caused an international controversy. But a US military investigation has concluded the soldier was acting in self-defense, as Paul Wood reports.
US Marines tread warily as they enter a mosque in Fallujah. They'd been attacked before by rebels playing dead. That's why American commanders say that what happened next was a legitimate act of self-defense. This was within the rules of engagement, but for many Arab viewers, it was also a clear case of a cold-blooded killing. Such incidents mean the insurgents can easily find recruits for attacks like this. With 60 dead here, yesterday's bombing was the bloodiest ever in Kurdish northern Iraq. In April last year, amid growing chaos in Iraq, there were 60 attacks a day on coalition forces. In the months after January's elections, that fell to 45 a day. Perhaps the tide had turned. But last month, it was 60 attacks a day again. There's evidence, too, that the insurgents are more skilled. As one US officer told me, the stupid ones have already been killed. A new government was supposed to stop all this, putting an Iraqi face on the battle against the insurgency. The recent spike in bombings may reflect attempts to derail this democratic process. There may be 50,000 insurgents, but no one really knows, and that's the problem. The coalition is still unsure who it's fighting, still less how to beat them. Paul Wood, BBC News.
The world's biggest computer company, IBM, says it's cutting thousands of jobs worldwide, most of them in Europe. The firm employs 25,000 people here in the UK. It says it needs to cut costs because of falling sales. It hasn't yet given details of where it'll make redundancies. A teenager has been jailed for life for the murder of the Nottingham jeweller Marion Bates. She was shot dead trying to protect her daughter during an armed robbery. Here's Duncan Kennedy.
Father and daughter leaving court. One more stage in their long ordeal now at an end. Victor and Xanthi Bates were both brutalised in the attack, but left Marion Bates dead. Their reaction to today's sentence, measured and subdued.
It's a decent sentence to a very indecent act, and I think a very sound and fair summing up by the judge.
Marion Bates was a 64-year-old woman who lived for her grandchildren. It was protecting their mother that cost her her life. Mrs. Bates was shot dead at the family jewellery business in Nottingham as she stepped between her daughter Xanthi and 2 armed robbers. Today, Peter Williams was jailed for life, the court hearing that he'd just been released from detention for an earlier crime and had even removed his own electronic tag. Even though Peter Williams didn't pull the trigger, he was still sentenced today for murder. The law clearly stating that it was an integral part of the robbery that led to the death of Marion Bates, in what the judge called this callous and brutal manner. James Brodie, the man who's believed to have fired the gun that killed Mrs. Bates, has never been caught. The gunmen's combined actions traumatised the close family, leaving dead a wife, mother and grandmother, at the hands of those who the judge said showed a contempt for human life. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News.
Security has been tightened at UK diplomatic missions in the United States after a bomb attack outside the British consulate in New York. No one was hurt when the 2 small devices exploded in the early hours. The blast shattered windows in the building, which also houses several foreign companies. The judge in the Michael Jackson child abuse trial has refused to dismiss the charges against the singer. That means defence lawyers have had to begin their case. They plan to call on a list of celebrity witnesses, including Stevie Wonder and Diana Ross. Among the first will be Wade Robson, a star choreographer who the court was told shared a bed with Jackson when he was 10. Michael Jackson denies all the charges against him. And that's the news for now. I'll be bringing you updates on the election throughout the night. And that's it for now. Back to you, David.
Thank you very much. Well, now, just a bit of advice. If you want to go into more detail in these results during election night, you can go to our interactive TV service. That means that if you're watching digitally, you can now press the red screen and you can access our multi-screen, and throughout the night you can catch up with all the highlights and the results there. And if you don't have a red button, there's a full results service on CFAX, that's page 700, or of course on the BBC's website, bbc.co.uk/election 2005. Little bits of news. The Liberal Democrats are claiming that they've taken Eastbourne, or they're going to, from the Conservatives. Malcolm Rifkind, who's standing in Kensington and Chelsea, has said that he thinks that the exit poll is probably reliable, and Lynton Crosby, the man who advised the Conservatives on their campaign, thinks that they're going to gain about 50 seats, which is roughly in line with what we've been talking about. Well, now let's go and hear from the three party leaders, the people who, after all, have all the information coming into them during election day. Martha Carney is in Sedgefield, Tony Blair's constituency. Martha, good evening. What's the news there?
Well, the mood from Mirabella House, which is named for the plum trees in the Prime Minister's back garden, I don't know whether you're aware of that, it is interesting. I mean, there's scepticism that we've been hearing about the idea of the exit poll, and they're talking, even if it is a majority of 66, they'll say this will be an historic Labour victory. But what's particularly interesting, I think, is the fact that they seem very angry at the Liberal Democrats. They say that the Liberal Democrats are supposed to be a progressive party, and all they've done is ended up supporting the Conservatives. This is one of the fault lines behind the scenes in the campaign. At what point should they attack the Liberal Democrats? A lot of senior Labour figures feel that they should have gone for them earlier on in the campaign. And the size of the majority, the point that Andy was making earlier, is very important, both in terms of what Tony Blair can do, in terms of he wants to have a radical third-term agenda to push forward public service reforms, irreversible reforms in terms of his own legacy, but also in terms of the team of people around him. Now, they've campaigned very strongly as a team, and there's been a lot of speculation about what's likely to happen in the cabinet if Labour does, in fact, win the election. And my understanding is that all the top jobs, the phrase that was used to me, is steady as she goes. We already know about Gordon Brown as Chancellor. My understanding is that Jack Straw will remain as Foreign Secretary. There's been talk about John Prescott staying as Deputy Leader, but perhaps losing some of his department to David Blunkett. Now, he's been resisting that very fiercely, so I think that's unlikely to happen, though David Blunkett will come back in, and I think we'll also see a cabinet job for David Miliband. Now, the Prime Minister, like everybody else around the country, will be watching the results very eagerly, taking calls from all around the country. He's going to be here at his constituency house for another couple of hours, and then he'll be going off to Sedgefield, his last count as Labour leader, and maybe his last count as MP for this constituency.
And Martha, if it is the kind of majority that people are talking about, what effect will it have on the Prime Minister's determination to serve a full term? I mean, will there not be angry Labour backbenchers who try and prevent that happening?
Well, it's very interesting. It's all to do with the debt that he's perceived to have owed Gordon Brown or not. That was one of the most important things that happened in this campaign, was the fact that Gordon Brown was called in aid, was acted as his human shield, some people are saying. And it also depends on the kind of MPs that are elected, if it is that 66 figure, doesn't it, in terms of the pressure they may put on him. If it had been a much bigger majority, then Tony Blair, I'm sure, would have been absolutely determined to serve the 3.5 years. A lower majority does raise more question marks about that.
Well, thanks very much, Martha. You come out of the gale for a bit. We go down to Folkestone and Hythe, and that, of course, is Michael Howard's seat. It has been his seat since 1983. And Kirsty, what's the news there from the Tory camp? Have you had a reaction to this exit poll from them?
Well, I mean, what the Tories are saying just now is, steady as he goes, it's going to be a long night. It's interesting what Margaret Beckett was reportedly saying about immigration having paid off, because certainly here in Folkestone, Michael Howard in his election leaflet called this the front line with Europe. It's also interesting here that, of course, Charlie Kennedy came here on Tuesday and proclaimed that Liberal Democrats were going to take the seat from Michael Howard. Now, if the exit poll is anywhere near accurate, there's not a cat's chance of that happening. And in fact, the Liberal Democrats locally here have not been very popular anyway, because they made a mess of being in power locally. So now we can see here that the ballot boxes are arriving, the verification is beginning. That he has represented this seat, as you said, since 1983, but he's been leader since November 2003. The question is, will he still be leader of the party this time tomorrow night. That we're still to know. We know that people like Ken Clarke have said that he should stay on. We know that commentators have said he should stay on and that he should not do what John Major did or indeed what Haig did and leave almost immediately. Now, both he and Sandra Howard, I believe, are still in their house. It's only about 20 minutes away. They're going to be coming here about 45 minutes before the declaration, and we reckon that will be late into the night, probably around 3:30.
Kirsty, thanks very much. Well, we'll be back with you, no doubt, several times during the evening. But thanks for joining us, and we're going now to Scotland, to Fort William, where Rita Chakrabarti is following... Rita, you're following Charles Kennedy's campaign.
Yes, indeed, and Charles Kennedy has been here at home for most of the day, having a well-earned rest, I suppose. He has travelled over 14,000 miles on this campaign and visited 39 different constituencies. He came out earlier in the morning to vote with his wife Sarah and visited a few of the polling stations, but otherwise has had quite a quiet day today. He has to drive about an hour and a half north to Dingwall to attend his count. He'll probably be leaving about sort of half midnight, 1 o'clock, although I'm told that the time of his departure rather depends on his little baby Donald's feeding times, because Donald will be going with his father and mother to the count. But he will, of course, be watching everything that's going on, possibly with a sense of disappointment if these exit polls are accurate and the Liberal Democrats do seem to have picked up as few as 2 seats. I think he will be extremely disappointed. He's fought a very confident and positive and optimistic campaign, although a senior aide of his did tell me yesterday that they did think that the fight in the marginal seats was extremely close. So we're going to have to wait and see whether that poll is accurate or not.
Rita, thanks very much. We'll be back with you again later. And we rejoin now Peter Snow up in the gallery there. Peter.
Well, now let me introduce you to our 3-party battleground. A first in British elections, because the Liberal Democrats have really arrived on the scene right in the thick of it. Here it is. Now, here's the Labour Party in the old Parliament. 400 or so Labour MPs over here. The Tories over here, and the Liberal Democrats over there. Now, you'll notice we've drawn lines between the parties. Those are the battlefronts. Those are the most vulnerable areas in those parties. The nearer these MPs are to those battlefronts, the smaller their majorities, the more vulnerable they are. So, for example, over here, look at them all going blue. This is the Tory dream, to turn those vulnerable Labour MPs near their battlefront blue. And the same all the other way around. If we go right over here to the safest part of Labour's arena, over here we see Michael Martin, the Speaker in North East Glasgow, safe as houses, because he's really unthreatened, unchallenged by the other parties. He's a very long way from the Liberal Democrats and the Tories over there. Now, back to the front line again. This is the part that matters. These are the vulnerable Labour and Conservative MPs. Let's open up and have a look here at someone who's right on the edge. There's Russell Brown, then Dumfries and Galloway. Majority 141 on the new boundaries. He could go over without any trouble at all. Very, very close to the line. Now, the Tories and Labour have their battlefront here. Look over here at the battlefront between the Liberal Democrats and the Tories. And look who's near the edge there. Oliver Letwin, 1,400 is majority in Dorset West. Very close to the edge. And shadow cabinet ministers behind him, culminating in Michael Howard himself in Folkestone. 6,000 his majority there. Now, turn around to the other battlefront the Liberal Democrats have, this time with Labour. And here you see how sparse the territory is in front of the Liberal Democrats there. Not many Labour MPs vulnerable to them. One, Cardiff Central. Here is John Owen Jones, majority of 650. But that's the battlefront the Liberal Democrats badly want to liven up. Now let's close it up again, our 3-way battleground, and look at the exit poll forecast. Now, this is only our exit poll. Don't take it too seriously. But if this really happened, we would find the Tories advancing a little bit into Labour territory over there. You can see something like 20 or 30 of those red ones going blue. Down where the Liberal Democrats are. There we are. The Liberal Democrat vote holding up quite well in the Labour marginals with them. The Labour vote dropping away. Disillusioned Labour voters giving way to Liberal Democrats in those seats. But interestingly, on the other battlefront there, it looks like the Tory vote is holding up pretty well in the Tory Liberal Democrat marginals. Fascinating night coming up. So, there it is. That's our 3-way battleground. 3 separate but related battle fronts. And just as the MPs get more vulnerable as they approach the battlefront line in here in the middle, the closer they are on our swingometer, the closer they are to the pendulum. the more vulnerable those MPs are. So there they go, the same MPs, the swingometer showing exactly the same story, and the closer they are to the pendulum, the more vulnerable they are. So, for example, here is Russell Brown in Dumfries and Galloway. A tiny swing would turn him from red to blue, David.
Thank you very much. Well, there's some odd bits of news coming in as the counts go on in various places. Dumfries and Galloway, for instance, counting away from the Glasgow count. We've heard, for instance, that down in Torbay, the turnout is hugely up from last time round. We've heard the Liberal Democrats are claiming they've taken Birmingham Perry-Barr. There is Torbay. And of course, if the turnout is over 70%, as they say it is, compared with 62 at the last election, it'll take a fair amount of time to get that result in. No, the Liberal Democrats are saying that they're confident they've taken Birmingham Perry-Barr, the 74th on their list. Tories are claiming they've taken Dartford from Labour, and Labour are saying they're in trouble.
This is astonishing. I mean, for the Liberal Democrats to take Birmingham Perry-Barr would be a remarkable result for them. Khalid Mahmood, the Labour MP in the past Parliament, Muslim. Dartford, they'd be delighted. If the Tories took Dartford, they would be very pleased indeed.
And Blaenau Gwent we saw there, where there is an independent candidate for Labour who was said to be doing very well against traditional Labour, and Thanet South, currently held by Labour. UKIP's top target, Nigel Farage of UKIP, is there. It used to be Jonathan Aitken's seat. So while we're waiting, and it's now 22:36, I reckon they have another 3.5 minutes to go in Sunderland South, we join Natasha Kaplinsky just to see what happens when these figures come in. Natasha.
David, thank you very much. Well, tonight, all those crucial facts and figures, that's what it's all about, all those important numbers. Without those numbers, Peter Snow's swingometer just wouldn't swing, would it? And this is the hub of the Results Centre, where volunteers from across the BBC have gathered to take on that rather nerve-wracking and momentous task of processing all the information that's being fed to them from the 500 reporters positioned up and down the country just as soon as those results are declared. So whether or not you're watching any of our television outlets, whether or not you're listening to the radio, you're logged onto the internet or simply plugged into CFAX, this is where all the information is being processed. None of these people are going to be leaving their seats until that last vote is counted, including Susanna here. It's a momentous night for everybody, really, Susanna, isn't it?
It is, absolutely, and we've been rehearsing various scenarios, various outcomes, and we're actually waiting for the read results to come in. That should happen any minute now.
There's a lot of coffee that's going to be drunk here later on this evening, but let me tell you, there's a party here at the BBC. I'm going there now. Hopefully you can join me there later on. David, back to you.
Good. Well, how are we doing? It's 22:37. What are we making of it, Philippa? Philippa? Can you hear me?
They say that they think they're on course. Most of the votes have been counted now. We're looking towards a possible declaration at around 10:40, which is when they said they thought they'd do it. That would be shaving 3 minutes off their previous record time. And of course, it would also get them into the Guinness Book of Records, because it would be Sunderland South declaring first for the 4th time in a row, and that has never been done before.
Good, thanks very much. Of course, it is quite serious, because when we get Sunderland South in, it does give us the first indication both about turnout and how people are going. We join Anna Ford. Anna, good evening. Anna's in Putney, and this is one of the key marginals that the Tories are hoping to take back.
And indeed, the count's already started here in Putney, and could be a very close-run thing. Tony Coleman, who you were talking about earlier, has held a seat for Labour since 1997 after that dramatic loss by David Mellor. And it would only take a 4% swing for the Conservatives to take it. Well, can Justine Greening, the young Conservative candidate, do that? She might well, if enough disaffected Labour voters voted Lib Dem. Now, because of something called the Wandsworth Gap, David, they won't want the Lib Dems to win, because they have the lowest council tax in the country here, because they have 100% Conservative councillors, even though they return a Labour MP. So it's an atypical constituency. There are a number of issues locally: crime, aircraft noise, pollution, local infrastructure and transport, but one quite odd one as well, which is fox hunting. A lot of people here belong to the Countryside Alliance, and they're very upset about Labour and fox hunting. So the Greens could pick up some votes, Lib Dems could pick up some votes, and from that, of course, Justine Greening could just knock Tony Coleman out. We're expecting the result at 12:30.
OK, Anna, well, we'll be back to you. Thanks very much indeed. And Nisha Pillai is in Peterborough. This is one of the targets for the Tories, about 43rd in their target. How does it look to you? Are Labour in trouble?
it is indeed a key target for the Conservatives, David. It is looking like something of a cliffhanger. The sitting Labour MP, Helen Clark, she's a colourful, a controversial character here, but she's being very strongly challenged by the Conservatives' Stuart Jackson. They have quite a lot of history. There's quite a lot of animosity between these two characters, and they've attracted a lot of attention in the local press. They're high-profile characters. They've challenged each other before. In the last elections, Stuart Jackson managed to squeeze Helen Clark's majority down from over 7,000 to 2,800, and all the signs tonight are that this is going to be squeezed a lot further.
Nisha, thanks very much.
The possibility of a recount.
Nisha, thank you very much indeed. We'll come back to you as soon as we can. There's a slight problem with the echo in the hall, which is a very grand hall, but it's a bit noisy. And we join John Sopel, who's got every count in Birmingham, as far as I can tell. John, haven't you, under your belt tonight?
Yes, David, we have 10 counts taking place here, and I sense that the Labour Party is feeling increasingly anxious as the evening wears on, and it's very early stages yet. Birmingham Edgbaston, you'll remember in '97, that was when it was clear that there was an electoral earthquake taking place when Gisela Stuart took it as Tory seat since 1922. They've started counting the Edgbaston constituency behind me there now, and I've spoken to a very senior Labour source. He says it is going to be very hard to hold onto it. Now, on the Tories' target list, it's number 101. So if they're digging in that deep into their target seats, that would be a very good result for the Conservatives indeed. We're also hearing that the Liberal Democrats are very confident in Perry Barr, a constituency that's split right down the middle into a very white area and very ethnically mixed area. There is only one non-Asian candidate standing, John Hunt for the Liberal Democrats, and the Liberal Democrats are confident they're going to take that. They're also confident they might take Birmingham Yardley. It could be a pretty bloody evening for the Labour Party here.
Well, it's a turbulent night anyway. And when are you going to get the first result you expect, John?
We were hoping that Edgbaston might declare at 11:45. That's what we've been told. However, if it's as close as everyone's saying, then you can't rule out that there are going to be recounts and there's going to be arguments over spoilt ballot papers. They're hoping 11:45 for Birmingham Edgbaston, and that will be a really fascinating result to see how that one goes.
Thanks very much. Well, we'll go up to Sunderland. It's 22-42. They've got to get moving if they're going to give the result. There's Chris Mullin, who's the Labour MP, or was the Labour MP, and hopes to be the Labour MP again. And there's no question that he will be, because his majority was very nearly 14,000 last time round. It'll be interesting to see what happens. He was a journalist and novelist, and then became Minister in the Foreign Office responsible for Africa and the Commonwealth, a man from the Benite left who's moved very much to become a Blairite over the years. Now 22-42, 47. Philippa, are they going to make it? I think the returning officer has to start speaking by 22-43, by 10:43, if they're to beat their record.
That's absolutely right. They're very, very tense here. They might not beat their record. They might miss it by just a matter of seconds. So everyone in the hall extremely tense. Of course, they could fail to beat their own timekeeping record, but still bring in the first result of the night and therefore get their four first results in a row. But they are very tense here. They got all the ballot boxes in by 12 minutes past, and they had said to me earlier, we hope to see all the ballot boxes in by 10 past. So maybe a little slip back there. Also, they've had postal votes in, and they say their turnout is up. Their turnout's up to 49.9%.
Hold on a second. Tony King, just mark our card for this. What should we be looking for in Sunderland?
As we listen to the returning officer, if Chris Mullin gets 19,500 votes, our exit poll nationally is more or less on the mark. If he gets more, Labour is doing better. If he gets worse, Labour is doing worse.
19,000...
19,500 is the figure to keep an eye out for.
OK, well, let's go back to Sunderland South, because I think the returning officer is just checking the figures. They've certainly not beat their 43, but here they go with the result.
The evening for the Sunderland South constituency. I, Jed Fitzgerald, Acting Returning Officer for the Sunderland South constituency, hereby give notice that the total number of votes for each candidate was as follows. David Edward Guinan, British National Party, 1,166. Gareth Kane, Liberal Democrat, 4,492. Christopher John Mullin, the Labour Party candidate, 17,982. Robert Jeffrey Oliver, the Conservative Party candidate, 6,923. Rosalind Warner, the official Monster Raving Loony Party, 149. And that Christopher John Mullen has been duly elected as Member of Parliament for the Sunderland South constituency.
Well, no surprise that Chris Mullen takes it, but Tony King, you said he had to get 19,500. He got just about 18,000.
That's right. And I think if I were Tony Blair, if I were any leading figure in the Labour Party, I would beginning to be a bit nervous. That's not the kind of overpowering result that you look for in that part of the world. One of the things that our exit poll was suggesting, the innards of the exit poll, was that the Labour vote might be flaky, and it looks as though it's flaked.
Let's just hear Chris Mullen.
Rather than the basest instincts of the British people. Concern for the common good has defeated the remorseless pursuit of self-interest. Hope has triumphed over fear, optimism over pessimism. We now have a chance to shape the lives of an entire generation. We must use it wisely. There are a number of people to whom I owe thanks. My Conservative and Liberal Democrat
Right,
opponents.
let's just have a look at those figures then from Sunderland South as Chris Mullen does the traditional votes of thanks to people. His majority, 11,059, that's down 2,600 from the last election. Robert Oliver, 6,923. Gareth Kane for the Liberal Democrats, 4,492. Turnout 49%, which is just about what it was last time round, not much change. And here's the change and the share. Let's have a look at the share first of all. 59% for Labour, 22% for the Conservatives, 15% for the Liberal Democrats, 4% for the others, which was the British National Party. And the key thing, the change since last time. Down 5 percentage points for Labour, 2 points up for the Conservatives, 3 points up for the Liberal Democrats. And that's a swing from Labour to Conservative of 4%.
Well, absolutely confirming what we thought was going on, which is that the Conservatives are doing a lot better than many people predicted. A little bit further news on that. There's apparently only a few hundred votes in it in Hove, where the Conservatives would need 3.8% to defeat Ivor Kaplan. But
this is Hove, actually, not Brighton, as they say down
Hove,
there.
not Brighton, but a very interesting result there. But do you remember we said right at the beginning we're going to get some very strange results coming in? It also looks very close in Hornchurch, where the Labour left-winger, one of the rebel intake, one of the rebels in the intake in '97, looks like he could conceivably hold on, which on those figures he ought not to be able to do.
Let's just have a look at the figures, Tony, on this form. There are the percentages, 59, 22, 15, 4, and a swing from Labour to Conservative, 4%. Now, it's the North East, it's a different place, it's not the whole of the UK. What credence do you give to that swing as the kind of swing we might be looking at through the night?
Well, very strikingly, although Sunderland is a safe seat, although it's in the north of England, on the whole, Sunderland South has proved a pretty good indicator of the kind of thing that was going to happen on the night. And one of the things that's interesting about those figures is the increase in the Liberal Democrat share. People in the Labour Party have been worried right from the beginning, have feared from the beginning, that quite a lot of people dissatisfied with the Labour government for whatever reason, over Iraq, over university top-up fees, whatever, would especially, but perhaps not only in safe Labour seats, switch to the Liberal Democrats.
And that seems to have been happening in Sunderland.
Indeed.
I mean, their vote is up by 3%, the Liberal Democrats.
Exactly. You see the Conservatives going up a tad, but you see the Liberal Democrats moving up in an area that's of no use to them. They're not going to win a seat in a place like Sunderland South. And it's going to be very interesting to see whether that conforms to a pattern over the country as a whole.
And just to cheer Tony Blair up. Claire Short has apparently said that a much reduced Labour majority would be a very good thing indeed for the Labour government, so he'll be very pleased to hear that. One other
Allow her to become deputy leader.
One other tiny little piece of news. We've been hearing a lot about the danger of fraud with postal votes. Apparently up in Aberdeen South, 20 postal votes have gone missing, and the returning officer there has expressed some concern about that. So that may well be another part of the story of the evening.
OK, well, Peter, it's rather thin pickings so far, but what do you make of that Sunderland South result?
Oh, I don't call it thin pickings at all, David. Our swingometer's jumping around with excitement. Here it comes. Here she comes. Now, if that pendulum moves over that way, those red Labour MPs turn blue. That would be a 5% swing to the Conservatives. If it moves over this way, those blue Conservative MPs turn red. No change at all from last time would leave Labour with a majority of 160 when you allow for boundary changes. It would take a swing of just over 6% to see Tony Blair's majority wiped out in a hung parliament. Now, we have a swing in Sunderland South of 4%. 3.9 to 4% in Sunderland South. Now that, if typical, and Tony said it often has been fairly typical, it would point to quite a low majority of 50 or a few above it for Labour, which is roughly what we were talking about in the exit poll, about 66 majority. The average swing in our exit poll is 2.5%. But what our exit poll is also suggesting is that Labour may be having trouble, as everybody's been referring to, in their marginal seats. And if Labour's having trouble in its marginal seats, expect that swing to be up there, more like what it was in Sunderland South in the marginal seats, pushing Labour's majority well below 100, David.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. Well, now, during tonight, up in Gateshead, we've got a little experiment. We're painting a picture, and Sian Williams is up there to explain exactly what we're doing. Sian.
Thank you, David. Yes, we're on the banks of the River Tyne, and we're right on the banks of the River Tyne, right next to the Millennium Bridge. And you can see that it links Newcastle and Gateshead. We're on the Gateshead side, and our bus has parked up on the Baltic Square. Now, people used to say about Gateshead that it was like a dirty little lane into Newcastle because of the deprivation here. Not anymore. You can see the amount of money that's gone into this area, millions of pounds of lottery money, not just on the bridge, but on the Sage Centre up there, which is a magnificent concert venue. And some people have come down there, they've been watching the concert, and they've come down to watch what's going on here. We'll be chatting to them in a minute. Hello to you. Thanks very much for being here. Now, the reason they've come down is to see, as you say, nice little experiment. Peter Snow might have all his computer trickery, but we have a bit of public art going on, and Robert Hall's going to explain a little bit more. Robert.
And here are the teams of painters. Are we up to the task? Yes! I should hope so. The political colours are familiar. The task is not. Here it is. It's the biggest painting by numbers set you have ever seen. 646 constituencies. They're all numbered to give our painters a hand. We're down here, number 590. But most exciting, of course, we've actually got a result. Sunderland South down here, number 558. Here's Catherine from Northumbria University. There is the first colour to go onto our map. Thanks very much, Catherine. Now, I think it's important to stress this is going to be quite a task. Look at these conurbations here, tiny little constituencies, an awful lot of painting down to Birmingham, Manchester, down to London, and as we get a little more blurry as the night goes on, this is going to get more and more difficult. But we do hope that by the end of the night, when people are waking up for breakfast, we can compete with Peter's map in London, and that this will be a sea of colour. Sian.
Thank you very much, Robert. Long night ahead for the teams as well. They're going to be very, very busy. And long night ahead if you're all going to stay as well, up until 6 o'clock in the morning. No, they're shaking their heads. Well, thanks for being here now. Just want to ask you a couple of questions, really, about whether you voted and who you voted for. Good evening, sir. Did you vote today?
Good evening. Yes, I did vote today, and I voted for the Liberal Democrats.
For the Liberal Democrats. Do you always vote for the Liberal Democrats, or did you change?
It varies between Labour and Lib Dem, and this year I decided that Lib Dems had my vote.
Why is that? Why did you turn away from Labour this time?
I felt that Labour needed more of a challenge in Parliament, and that the Lib Dems were the people to do that for me.
OK, could I ask you? Good evening to you, madam.
Hello.
Thank you very much for being here. Did you vote Labour or Lib Dem or Tory? How did you vote?
I voted Labour.
Mm-hmm. Do you always vote Labour?
I certainly did the last twice as well. Yeah.
Are you surprised by the exit poll? I mean, if it's to believe, then Labour is going to be back in, but with a very reduced majority of just 66. Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't surprise me, because I had to think twice about it. I considered Lib Dem, but then I decided, no, I'd rather have a Labour government in again, so they got my vote. But I'm not surprised, because I think a lot of people might have switched.
The North East, though, very, very safe Labour, normally, isn't it? Yeah. Can I ask you how you voted?
Well, normally it's a Labour seat up here, but I voted Lib Dem.
And why did you vote Lib Dem?
Because I think we need more balance in Parliament to have a more balanced debate. I think Labour have had it far too much their own way.
How did you think the campaign went?
It was all right. It was a bit presidential for my liking. I thought we saw too much of the leaders and not enough of the other candidates.
And what about you, sir?
I voted Liberal Democrat as well. Yeah. I voted Liberal Democrat because I think they gave more straight answers to questions when they were asked. Most of the Conservative and Labour politicians I saw on the television seemed to want to avoid the question and give the answer they wanted to give rather than answer the question that was asked. Whereas I thought the Liberals were more likely to answer a question.
Okay, all right, well, thank you very much. Back with you a little bit later on if you can. It's very chilly out here. We'll try and find something to warm you up. As I say, the North East is a very safe Labour. 28 out of the 30 seats were Labour last time. So if this is anything to go by, it'd be interesting to see how well the Liberal Democrats do here. Back to you, David.
Thanks very much, Sian. Well, we're back in the BBC's television centre there, with the results going up on the forecourt there. One Labour seat in so far, 324 needed to win. And the little tally on the left will also keep us going through the night with those figures. Now, the question is, where's our second result going to come from? It looks as though it could be right next to Sunderland, from Houghton and Washington East, or Houghton, I should call it, in Washington East, the seventh safest Labour seat and an early declarer. I don't know whether they're going to make it. How are things going in Houghton?
Well, yes, Houghton things are going really well here, David, at the moment. They've got all the ballot boxes in and they're counting away. Now, the race here is run by the same people that run the race for Sunderland South. But the reason things are slightly slow here is because the geography of the constituency, there are a lot more rural outlying areas, so they can't get the ballot boxes physically in here quite as quickly as they can into a more compact area like Sunderland South. But they're pleased with the way things are going, and they're hoping for a result sometime between 11:30 and 11:40, David.
Lisa, do you have any idea what the turnout is there?
No, we don't at the moment. We're waiting those figures at the moment, David.
OK, well, the race is on in other places. Birmingham, the ballot boxes are arriving at this moment. And we're going down in a moment to Guildford. We'll go to Torbay, perhaps. We could go to Barnsley. They're all there. Let's go to Torbay.
Hello, David. Yes, indeed. Well, we've been told, I've been speaking to Marcus Wood, the Conservative candidate here, and his indication is that turnout is going to be quite high. He thinks as high as 71%. Of course, it was about 64% in the last election. It's going to be very close as well. That's the indications that he's been given from the officials here. So you may remember, as you mentioned earlier in the programme, 1997, there was just 12 votes in it when the Liberal Democrats took this Tory stronghold. So everything to play for here, and we're hoping for a declaration around about midnight.
OK, and Barnsley Central. Thanks very much. Barnsley Central, how are things going there?
David, hi. Welcome to old Labour country. Some here believe new Labour hasn't got here yet, but this is a very safe seat in a very safe Labour county. 15,000 plus majority, so a lot of the effort is going in to get that declaration in early. You can see people counting away frantically behind me. Now, one interesting point, arguably, is the returning officer here is one Andrew Frosdick, who was at Sunderland last time, so he knows all about trying to get an early count. He says it's a lot of fun and the race is on to get that before 11. Only one declaration so far, and that was that a Volvo was blocking the entrance, keeping some of the boxes out, but we still hope for a result maybe just after 11.
Richard, do you have any clue how things have gone in terms of the number of people who've voted? Does the returning officer give you any idea or not at this stage?
Not yet. Not yet. We know that locally there was as I said, this is a very safe Labour area, but there was a problem with the war, and also some councillors were deselected here last time, so the turnout was expected to perhaps fall, but we won't know that until after 11.
OK, well, we'll join you again, Richard. Thanks so much. That was Richard Bilton, Lisa Mzimba before him in Barnsley Central. And now in Birmingham, their count is going on. They're rushing about. Nothing much seems to be happening there at the moment. Yes, they are. Bringing them in by lorry. There's so many seats in Birmingham, I'm amazed they don't get them all confused. Yes, in Edgbaston.
Absolutely. Again, that would be astonishing, because she's not really on anybody's target list of people likely to lose their seats.
Yes.
I mean, she's been a hard-working MP. She's been, of course, very prominent in the European constitutional debate. That maybe hasn't redounded enormously to her local popularity, but still, that would be astonishing.
Everybody's fate contained in those boxes. Yes,
David,
Tony.
we do need to be a little bit careful. We've been talking, all of us, a little bit about news. Most of the news so far has actually been rumours. Now, we've got a very high-class rumour in the form of an exit poll, but so far we've had only one actual result. That result was pretty remarkable, and it was in line with our exit poll, but there's a long way to go yet. And one of the most frustrating things about election evenings is how long it takes for the results to come in.
But when you say rumour, we mustn't mislead people. We're talking about claims. That's not quite rumour. I mean, when the Liberal Democrats claim a seat, it means they're pretty confident they've got it, doesn't it?
Sometimes it means they're confident, sometimes that means they're boasting.
All right. Well, let's go down to Guildford, because Gavin Esler's there, and there the Tories are trying to take the seat from the Liberal Democrats. Gavin, what's your impression?
Well, it's very, very close. I'm right down in the boiler room. This is where the votes are being counted. They've already separated out the county council votes, which will be counted tomorrow. They're now doing the aggregate count of the parliamentary seat votes, and then they'll split them and stick them over there for the different candidates. Now, we could expect a result before midnight, but also there could be a number of recounts. There certainly was last time. This is natural Tory territory. They've held this seat for almost 100 years, until 4 years ago when the Lib Dems took it, with a majority of 538. The Tories are desperate to win it back, because you can't really form a Conservative government if you can't hold Guildford. So it's very close. Everyone thinks it's very close, and we could actually be in for a very long night.
Gavin Esler in Guildford, thank you very much indeed. Well, there we are. Tony.
I think one of the things we ought to bear in mind, on the assumption that our exit poll is roughly right and that Labour's majority is very much down, we should still bear in mind the fact that Labour looks as though it's going to win the election. That means that Labour will have been in power for 12 or 13 consecutive years. It also means that the Conservatives have been on only about a third of the vote or less for 3 successive general elections. That has never happened to them before. Here they have a government that's an easy target, and it looks as though they're failing to hit it in the sense of overthrowing it.
We should have a look at the battleground then, Peter, at this stage, shall we? And just trying to clarify where it's being fought, this election.
Yes, David, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to walk rather gingerly over my map of the country, avoiding standing on the 80 critical red figures on this map that represent the Labour MPs that Mr Blair badly wants to hold their seats. 80 of them altogether in 3 clusters. One up here in the north, you can see, edged down now towards the West Midlands, and you're looking now at Birmingham and Corby, Kettering and seats like Milton Keynes North East. There then is London, most critical of all, London and the South East down the Thames estuary, absolutely central to Labour's defensive position. Now, I'm going to put all these figures up here onto Mr Blair's battleground, ranking them in their order of vulnerability to the opposition parties. There they go, 80 seats altogether. 80 seats altogether, beginning with Russell Brown, you may remember, up in Dumfries and Galloway, a majority of 141 when you allow for the boundary changes, getting more and more marginal at the top, getting safer and safer as they come down. Not very safe. Here's Melanie Johnson with just 1,200 majority last time, well in Hatfield. But as you go along here, so they get safer and safer for Mr Blair, until you get over here to Dumfriesshire, where Sean Marshall has a majority of 5,000. That gives you a measure of the sort of way the majorities change across this battleground. So, Mr Blair needs to hold at least one of these red seats if he's to retain a majority. What's our forecast suggest? Well, our forecast, and it's only a forecast based on an exit poll, suggests that quite a lot of these seats are going blue and gold for Liberal Democrat. Look at them coming right down the 3rd column, parachuting as far as the 5th column over here. Quite a lot of gains inside, deep inside Labour territory. Let's bunch them all together and see exactly how many we're forecasting. There we are. Something like 47 of these 80 seats may change colour, leaving Mr Blair with a rather smaller majority than he had in the last Parliament. Considerably smaller. Look at this. Here is our forecast. A majority of 66. It was 160. This will be quite an election for Mr Blair, and the Tories haven't done too badly. If it's right. If it's right.
Peter, well, thanks. But there are, of course, a lot of strange battles within this election going on. One of the most vicious that's been fought is down in Bethnal Green and Bow. George Galloway for Respect against Una King, and Raggy Omar is there. Raggy, good evening, and thanks for joining us. Now, just tell us what on earth has happened there tonight, because it's been dire for the last 3 weeks, hasn't it?
Well, it's not looking very good for Labour here, and we've been speaking to senior officers from Una King's campaign who say quite openly that it is very, very tight. Now, she had a majority of 10,000 or thereabouts from the last election, but they admit that it's looking very, very tight. They say that they believe that the Tories have held on to their share of the vote, but obviously Iraq has been an absolutely huge issue here. There are 45,000 Muslims living in this constituency. Iraq has been hammered away at by George Galloway and the Respect Party, and they deny that she's lost or it's looking that bad, but they are worried.
There were, during the campaign, reports of death threats. There were fairly violent bust-ups. There were rows about corrupt postal voting. Has all that surfaced today for a start? Is it peaceful in Bethnal Green and Bow, as far as you can tell?
Yes, it has been very peaceful, and you're right, it's been an absolutely vitriolic and very, very vicious campaign, and some incredibly angry words said, particularly between George Galloway and Una King, and at times it seemed that the 5 other candidates running have been almost invisible. Such has been the sort of slugfest between those 2 candidates, but it has been peaceful. I don't think either Una King or George Galloway are here, and we're expecting them a bit later on.
But your impression, anyway, at the moment, is that Una King is very worried?
Yes.
And your forecast for the result time, you say?
Around 2 o'clock, but that's fairly imprecise, but around there, I should think.
Raghi, thank you very much indeed. We'll come back to you. And now let's go and join Natasha, who said she was going to enjoy herself at a party while we all sat here talking politics. And there she is.
I'm not sure enjoyment's the word. Good evening to you, David. Yes, as I said, this is the BBC's election party. All sorts of people here eagerly anticipating the result this evening. A number of people have turned up, including the Prime Minister. Excuse me, Prime Minister Tony Blair. Very nice to see you here at the party this evening. How are you going to be looking back at this campaign?
Well, I think it's very interesting. You know, there are reports that this could be a lot closer than many people had anticipated. Looking at the scores now, we've got 1 and the other 2 have 0 so far. And if Liverpool can win over Chelsea like that, then maybe we can too. I wanted a landslide victory. Whether that's going to happen, I don't know. I wanted to be Pope because I am infallible and everyone knows it. Next question.
You've had some extraordinary press coverage, haven't you, during this campaign?
Well, we have. That's part of the rough and tumble of politics. I think many readers of The Sun were quite intrigued to find that for Cherie's last birthday, I got her a nice little piece of paper with "I love you" lots written on one side and lots of little stick figures with lots of crosses and kisses all over the other side. But Cherie had just as much right of seeing Lord Goldsmith's justification for taking us to war in Iraq as anyone else, and I made that possible and I made it happen, and I would do that again. Next question.
You are very confident, aren't you? You think you're going back into Downing Street?
Well, I don't know whether it's a question of confidence, Natasha. It's just Conservative leaders keep coming along and I keep beating them. I think my advice to the party might well be, simply, to lead the Conservatives, don't have a permanent leader, just have a different guest leader each week, rather, like on Have I Got News for You.
I see, okay.
Anne Robinson one week, and then next week you can have a go. The week after that, the leader of the Conservative Party, Gordon Brown. If I can make it happen, we will see.
Well, thank you very much indeed for sparing us. I know there are lots of people that want to talk to you. Well, maybe not. A few people that want to talk to you.
I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to hide. I'm going to get you some Pernod.
Pernod, not my drink of choice. David, thank you very much. Yes, come back to us later on. I'll see who else I can find apart from the Prime Minister. I'm more frightened, let me tell you.
Natasha, thanks very much. Just before we go over to Jeremy, any tidbits to throw him for his guests there?
And this is, absolutely right. Tony King was mentioning this is rumour and reportage, but in that spirit, there is a rumour, there is reports that in Cleethorpes things are very tight. Now that is 115th on the Conservative target list, and again, that would be quite astonishing.
Seaside resort just south of Grimsby, and Grimsby incidentally seems to have a high national BNP vote
it's one of those
being
areas
reported.
Yes.
Okay. Jeremy, all yours.
Thank you, David. Well, let's talk to you first, Charlie Faulkner. You were a flatmate of the Prime Minister, whom we saw speaking a second or two there.
I think we saw somebody pretending to be the Prime Minister.
You don't say.
That's what I thought.
This was, wasn't it, thinking of all 3 parties, main parties, this was a campaign that was really focused around leaders in a way that we haven't seen in previous campaigns for a very, very long time. Why was that? Shelley Williams, why do you think it was?
I think it's largely because of the media. I mean, it's very much television driven. I think we're also seeing a presidential development by the Prime Minister, which means that everybody then becomes presidential. I don't myself very much agree with it. I think it'd be better to have put forward a more cabinet structure with teams, but we haven't been given that option. And what we've seen, I think, is, particularly in the case of the Conservative Party, the almost total domination of Michael Howard of the whole of the Conservative group.
Why didn't we see any of your shadow cabinet members vote? Every time Michael Howard came out, he was there by himself.
It's not entirely true that he was always there by himself. I mean, there were press conferences which were run by others, which didn't attract quite the same amount of attention from your profession. I agree with Shirley. I think a lot of the pressure, not all the pressure, I think a lot of the pressure came from the media. But I do actually rather regret the increasingly presidential style of British politics. I really do, because it's something more than just personalities now. It's coming down to image as well. It's trivialising the process.
I think we're joined now from Bolton by Ruth Kelly, the Education Secretary. You've got about a 5,000 vote majority up there. How's it looking for you tonight?
Well, I'm hoping it will be all right, but of course it's far too early
Only
to
hoping.
say yet. Well, as we've always said, this fight has always been tight in the marginal seats. Now, the reception that I've got today has been a pretty warm one. People have been coming out to vote, but generally later in the day. It's been pretty rainy and miserable here today as well. So I'm hoping that enough people came out to support me tonight.
Do you agree with your cabinet colleague Margaret Beckett that immigration raised its head in this campaign in a way that was very unhelpful to you?
Well, I think it did come up on the doorstep more than it has done in the past, but it was clearly not the only issue that voters were concerned about. They were far more interested in what's happening to schools, what's happening to hospitals, and in the strength of the economy, and those have been the issues we've been fighting the campaign on.
We were just talking about how much this campaign focused upon the leaders. Your own leader was a liability, wasn't it? If this was a referendum on trust, he would have lost.
That's not true at all. I think everybody realises that if you compare the last 8 years, when Tony Blair was leader of the Labour Party and led a Labour government, we have seen the transformation of public services with continued investment in schools and hospitals, and people's lives have been changed for the better.
In that case, why don't people trust him?
Well, I think when people look back on the record, they see what he's delivered. And actually, when we go forward tonight, I mean, we don't yet know what the vote will bring.
No, absolutely. But when you were going round on the doorsteps, people didn't say to you, I wish you got a different leader, or I'll vote for you because you've got Gordon Brown.
Actually, the mood that I've picked up on the doorstep has been quite a positive one. Now, we've always been clear that in the marginal seats it's been pretty tight, and it's really been a turnout election. It will depend on how many people got up and made it to the polling station and cast their vote. But I think we have won the argument of ideas. It now remains to be seen how we fare in terms of votes.
OK, well, we'll get back to you when you see what's happened. Thanks, Ruth Kelly.
Thank you.
What do you make of that defence?
Well, I mean, she's a very loyal cabinet minister, fairly new, so obviously hoping to
loyal.
keep her job. I mean, no, that parrots the traditional Blair line, is that he's disappointed in the electorate. He probably wouldn't have voted for us. We have not really taken on board his arguments. You know, he can't be bothered to argue anymore. He told us, look, I've told you enough times why you should trust me, and you don't, therefore I'm sick of you. And I think that's why he's going to have a wobble in places like Birmingham, because a lot of people at the last minute will have thought, you're just too smug for words. We can't have this.
I've got another wobble, Jeremy. I think we're about to win Cardiff Central.
How do you know that?
I just do know these little things.
There's someone running along with bits of paper.
David Steele always used to sit here with his pager going infuriatingly.
I haven't got any runners,
I
but
haven't got
my
a pager.
theory is that a lot of people who won't admit to voting Tory actually have. I mean, the
Well, in
sense of
this case,
shame
they've
in this
been
country
That's
is
a
still great.
surprise. OK, David.
Jeremy, thanks very much indeed. Cardiff Central, Liberal Democrats? Yeah. Shirley plucked it out of the ether. It's possible.
One of the most remarkable things about what we're hearing, these tidbits of rumour, is that although the exit poll was suggesting that the Liberal Democrats would gain net 2 seats, it sounds as though the Liberal Democrats may be doing very well. If they're actually doing as well in Birmingham Perry Bar, in Birmingham Yardley, in Eastbourne, as is being suggested, then the Liberal Democrats must be standing to lose an awful lot of seats somewhere else if our exit poll is to turn out to be right.
And one must trust their claims, because, I mean, there's no merit in... They get egg on their face if they're claiming wrongly to have done things.
I mean,
it's like, you remember when we had exit polls that went wrong, Mrs Thatcher always used to blame the BBC as though there was some merit in getting the exit poll wrong. I shall never forget that. But I mean, yes, Cardiff Central...
Well, they ought to take that. I mean, I think the Labour candidate there, John Owen Jones, thinks it's a goner, and everybody assumes that's one of the ones they'll take.
Let's have a look. Fiona, can we have a look at how things have got? We haven't got very much in yet, but let's just see what the trend is?
Well, let me tell you what we've got so far. As you say, not that much in. We've got one result in, so that's 645 to go. The exit poll, remember, is predicting a Labour majority of 66. That's against 160 they currently have. Now, the Foreign Office Minister, Chris Mullin, he was the first MP elected tonight in Sunderland South, but he had a reduced majority, and there was a 4% swing to the Conservatives.
And that Christopher John Mullin has been duly elected as Member of Parliament for the Sunderland South constituency.
Meanwhile, the former Foreign Secretary Robin Cook, who resigned over the issue of Iraq, has told the BBC he believes the war has undoubtedly affected the election.
I think any Labour candidate who's been out there talking to the public, listening to people on the doorstep, will have heard that the war has made an impact. Even I, in Livingston, have had a number of people saying to me that they can't vote for me because they were against the war in Iraq. Heaven knows what more I could have done to convince them that I also was opposed to the war. And if it was like that for me, it must have been at least as strong for others.
For the Conservatives, Liam Fox, the party's co-chairman, said the picture differed from area to area.
The only two predictions I think I would make are there will be no uniform national swing and there will be no uniform regional swing. I think that we'll have to look at this on a constituency by constituency basis. I think it will be...
Turnout will have a big impact on tonight's result, and there's been an early indication in Torbay where turnout has been estimated at between 68 and 78%. That's well up from the last elections. Officials say voters were queuing up to cast their votes. That's the latest for now. If you want more details, you can go to our interactive service on digital TV. You just need to press the red button if you haven't got one. A full results service is available on CFAX, that's on page 700, or look on our website at bbc.co.uk/election 2005. David.
Fiona, thanks so much. Well, we've been talking about results in England. Indeed, we've only had this one result from England. We've been gossiping about Wales a bit. We haven't talked very much about Scotland. We go up to Glasgow and join Sally Magnuson to hear what the story is in Scotland, where all the boundaries have changed, where there used to be 72 seats at Westminster, and this time round there are only 59. That's 13 fewer. Sally, good evening. Can you paint the picture of Scotland and what we should be looking out for there? Hello.
Hello, well, you're right that massive boundary changes have reduced the number of seats in Scotland from 72 to 59, and they've created new, completely unfamiliar constituencies in all but 3 cases in Scotland. Some of them with enormously long and complicated names, the longest, I'm told, actually in election history, like Inverness, Nairn, Badenoch and Strathspey, which sounds like some kind of new Cayley dance. You know, ladies and gentlemen, let's take our partners for the Inverness, Nairn, Badenoch and Strathspey. But the interesting thing is that although it's been possible to work out notional majorities and a notional political balance in these new constituencies, it's a very imprecise art. The Scots are actually notoriously rather sophisticated tactical voters, and we don't know to what extent the way that they voted last time would be replicated in any case in these new constituencies when there are new political marginal balances to take into account. So there's a deep unknowability to start with about the political landscape in Scotland tonight. And these boundary changes have then gone on to throw up all sorts of interesting, really very fascinating marginals in Scotland. Now, if we take a look at some of these, the SNP, for instance, it's a 4-horse race here in Scotland. The SNP, if it's going to make any progress at all, has really got to pick up a couple of seats as well as keep the notional 4 that they've got. They've really got to take Dundee East. It's been made very favourable for them by boundary changes. They've taken a lot of voters in from Angus, which is an SNP seat. If they can't win Dundee East on a swing of 0.6% or so, then really it's going to be a very bad night for the SNP. Ochil, the former MP Annabel Ewing has lost out on the boundary arithmetic there, so she is fighting a notional Labour majority, but she's in a good position because this is the heartland of the Black Watch, and the SNP have fought very hard on a Save the Scottish Regiments campaign to stop the amalgamation of the 6 Scottish regiments, which the government's planning and which is very unpopular in Scotland. So high hopes really in Ochil and South Perthshire of SNP taking that. Nahelin and Anyar, the Western Isles seat, which is abbreviated there in a strange way, but I'm told Gaels approve of it. That seat unlikely, perhaps, that the SNP will catch that tonight, although they've had their eye on it for many elections. You never know how it'll go. Then the Conservatives, very interesting night for the Conservatives. Their job is to clamber back on the political map of Scotland in a Westminster sense. They're notionally down to no seats at all, but they've got a very close fight in Dumfries and Galloway. When we've got two sitting MPs, it's going to be a very, very fascinating one to watch this. Because 141 votes separate them notionally, and you've got Russell Brown for Labour and Peter Duncan, who's the shadow Scottish Secretary of State, fighting it out there in this new constituency. And if Conservatives rather are to come back in Scotland in Westminster sense, they must win this seat. Another one, the neighbouring seat, Dumfriesshire, Clydesdale and Tweeddale, fascinating one as well. On paper, this is a Labour majority of about 5,000, but I think everybody agrees that there are a lot of independents down in that part of the country. It's a big rural constituency. The notional majority has probably over-egged the situation there, and the Conservatives have got a good chance. And indeed, the intelligence we're getting from down there tonight is that the Tories do feel they have got that seat. David Mundell,
Sally,
the challenger there, is feeling pretty comfortable about it.
Sally, thank you very much. I've got to cut in on you because
well.
Sally, thanks very much indeed. We'll come back to you in a wee bit, but I've got to cut in on you because we want to go down to Wales. Thanks very much. And join Sian Lloyd. Wales, where Labour is being chased variously by the Liberal Democrats, Plaid Cymru and the Tories, Sian.
David, absolutely. Labour sources have told us that they face a long night ahead here in Wales. They admit that they're under pressure in 6 marginal seats, and they suggest that 1 or 2 seats could have been lost. Now, the Conservatives are telling us that they're confident that they've taken Monmouth. That's the most marginal seat in Wales. Labour hold it by 384 votes, and the Conservatives are saying that they've taken it by a majority possibly of more than 3,000. Here in the CIA in Cardiff, the votes for Cardiff Central are being counted behind me. That's a top target seat for the Liberal Democrats, and they are saying that they are confident that they have taken Cardiff Central tonight. There's been a very fierce campaign fought here by Jenny Willett. They've been targeting particularly the student vote on their education policy. Plaid Cymru's top target seat is Ynys Môn. They're fighting to take it back from Labour. It was won by Albert Owen in 2001. It was the shock of the night that it went to Labour, but Plaid Cymru say it's too close to call at the moment. It's going to depend on how many people actually turned out to vote there. Labour will be hoping that people in the working class areas of the island, such as Holyhead, have turned out for their vote. Plaid Cymru are hoping that they've got their voters out. But I'm joined here now by Alan Michael, Rural Affairs Minister. Alan Michael, it looks like it's not going to be a very good night for Wales.
Well, we knew it was going to be very tight for the Labour Party in Wales because we had such a large majority. We had no Conservative seats in Wales. For the Conservatives to claim they're making real inroads in Wales, they'd have to win 8 or 9 seats, and it doesn't look as if they're going to manage to do that. There are a number of seats that are 3-way marginals, where obviously tactical voting can take place. But it should be remembered that on the figures that we're talking about and the exit polls, it would still be a startling good result compared with anything before 1997.
There could be further shocks, though, couldn't there? In Blaenau Gwent was the safest seat in Wales, the 5th safest in the United Kingdom. Peter Law there, the EM, he's been deselected by Labour, row over the women's shortlist. So it's too close to call there, isn't it?
Well, he hasn't been deselected. He's the Assembly member. He was not the MP. And I think Blaenau Gwent can be regarded more as a family squabble than anything that's going to indicate. I do hope that it's retained by Labour. We've got a very good candidate there who will be a very good MP. Otherwise, I think the constituency will lose out in the short term in terms of representation. So there are constituencies in Wales where there are very much local factors, but I think it should be remembered that we will, whatever happens tonight, be able to say that we've beaten off a Conservative challenge and that Labour remains very much the dominant party in Wales.
Alan Michael, we must leave it there. We'll be keeping a close eye on those marginal seats.
OK, thanks so much, Sian. We've had odd news of a couple of places, Norfolk North and Ribble Valley, where people have been turned away from the polling stations when they closed at 10 o'clock. Queues outside, and Norfolk North sitting down and complaining that they hadn't been allowed to vote. Anyway, everybody has to stand for election, of course, from the House of Commons, and there's some famous figures there. Ian Duncan Smith, who never actually got to fight an election for the Tories, though he was stopped during this campaign and congratulated on his brief period as Prime Minister. and Nicholas Soames in Sussex Mid. Grandson of Winston Churchill, shadow defence spokesman for the Tories. Anyway, we are going to go to Sunderland North because we think that Sunderland is going to be the second result we get tonight. So we go up and join Philippa Thomas again in Sunderland.
And indeed, we're just about to hear the results, all the candidates gathering on stage. Sunderland just loving being in the spotlight tonight, David. So we are going to hear the returning officer read out the results here. Again, a strong Labour seat, but we're looking at turnout, we're looking at swing.
I, Jed Fitzgerald, acting returning officer for the Sunderland North constituency, hereby give notice that the total number of votes for each candidate was as follows. Stephen Dorton, the Conservative Party candidate, 5,724. William Etherington, the Labour Party candidate, 15,719. Neil Herron, Independent, 2,057. Deborah Hiles, British National Party, 1,136. James Halern, Liberal Democrat, 4,277. And that William Etherington has been duly elected as Member of Parliament for the Sunderland North constituency.
It looks much the same story, doesn't it?
It looks very much the same story. It looks as though the Liberal Democrats have done pretty well, and it probably means that people who would otherwise have voted Labour have said to themselves, I do indeed want to give Tony Blair a kicking, and this is the best way to do it.
Here are the figures. William Etherington, his share of the vote down by 8 percentage points. Conservatives up 1.9, the Liberal Democrats up 2.7. Majority of 9,000. He was on 13,000 before, or 10,000, he was on 13 before. This is the share of the vote then. And the change since last time round, the Independent at 7% there, and the change since last time round. And that shows a swing from Labour to Conservative of 5%.
Worse than our exit poll suggested. I think we're beginning to see a pattern here. It's very early. The real question will be whether in lots and lots of swing seats that same pattern takes place. Former Liberal Democrat-leaning people no longer prepared to vote Labour, coming away and letting seats in other parts of the country go Conservative.
Peter, what does that do to your picture of the outcome of this election?
Well, it's making it all the more exciting, David. There is our swingometer. The swing that the Tories need to scrap Mr Blair's majority, to take it down from 160 in the last House to nothing, to a hung Parliament in this House, is 6.5%. The swing in Sunderland North is 5%. So again, if that were typical, we don't know, then it would be a lot closer to that dangerous point for Mr Blair. Remember, Sunderland South, just next door, was a 4% swing to the Tories, much more than most of the polls were suggesting, and indeed something more than the 2.5% in our exit poll is suggesting. So there we are. Just look, very important thing to look at here. You notice that when you get above about 3% in the swing, you can see an awful lot of red MPs lying in wait there to be turned blue. So there's a critical moment between 4 and 6% at which an awful lot of Labour's power collapses. David.
Well, yes, Tony, go on. I'm just going to say we've got another one in the North-East. The North-East is absolute magic. I mean, not just it is magic, the North-East, but it's magic on election night because they get their counts in so fast.
Absolutely.
And we're going to go to Houghton in just a moment, I think, and Washington East. We'll join Nisa up there.
But one very striking feature about that particular result in Sunderland North is that you saw the Labour vote falling very sharply, but that swing to the Conservatives was a bit of arithmetical hocus-pocus in a way, because the Conservative vote went up very little. What you saw was the Labour vote fragmenting, going all over the place. And what will be very interesting to see when we get seats from other parts of the country and closely fought marginal seats, whether that pattern reproduces itself or whether people stick with the Labour Party or alternatively swing right the way over to the Conservatives, which looks at least as possible from some of the news stroke rumours that we've been getting so far.
So what can we make of a swing of 5% in those circumstances then? Are you saying we should ignore it?
I don't think we should ignore it. I think we should take very seriously the very sharp decline in Labour's share of the vote. But I don't think we should infer from a result in a place like Sunderland North or South, for that matter, that that's what we're going to be getting throughout the night. The results throughout the night could conceivably be much worse for Labour if people want to give Tony Blair enough of a kicking that they're prepared to vote Tory.
Okay. We're getting reports that Stephen Twigg in Enfield Southgate is in trouble. That was the seat, of course, that Portillo lost in '97. And Gordon Brown is arriving at his Kirkcaldy count with his wife Sarah, the man who came out hand in hand with Tony Blair during this campaign and was widely said to have been brought out to switch the focus away from Tony Blair and towards Mr. Brown's claimed successes on the economy, and said that he'd certainly make a very good Prime Minister. Mr. Blair said, well, if these results are coming through and Andrew Marr is right, he may be Prime Minister sooner than he thinks. But we should talk about that later on. Let's just hear from Nizo Mzimbo in Houghton and Washington, because that may be coming through in a moment, Houghton and Washington East. Is that right, Nizo?
Yes, that is, David. We're just waiting here in the next few minutes. We think we're probably between 30 seconds and a minute away from hearing the result here. Indications are that the turnout here is slightly up on last time, and we're just waiting in the next 30 seconds or so to hear what's going to be happening here in Houghton and Washington East.
Well, let's stay with you if it's really coming through in 30 seconds' time. We were watching Gordon Brown up in Scotland, but if we're getting this result from Houghton, this is the 7th safest Labour seat. A Blairite, Fraser Kemp, there, with a majority of 19,800 or so last time round. And Conservatives and Liberal Democrats both did very poorly there. They both got under 5,000 at the last election. So once again, it'll be a test of what's happened to that Labour vote.
What I'm getting at the moment from the Labour Party strategists is that they think our exit poll might have been a bit rosy for them. They're somewhat pessimistic, and they think the Liberal Democrats are doing rather better, is their view, than was shown by the exit poll.
Returning officer for the Houghton and Washington East constituency hereby give notice that the total number of votes for each candidate is as follows. Anthony Stewart Devenish, the Conservative Party candidate, 4,772 votes. Mark Greenfield, Liberal Democrat, 6,245 votes. Fraser Kemp, the Labour Party candidate, 22,310 votes. John Richardson, British National Party, 1,367 votes, and that Fraser Kemp has been duly elected as Member of Parliament for the Houghton and Washington East constituency.
Well, that's our third result in, and no question, of course, about Fraser Kemp not taking that seat, but Tony, he's down again.
Again, very, very striking. We are having a pattern, at least in safe Labour seats in the north of England. And the pattern is for no great rise in the Conservative vote. Far from it, the Conservatives not doing particularly well, but an awful lot of people who voted Labour in 2001, voted Labour in 1997, and probably long before that, saying to themselves, I'm not entirely happy with this government. There is an alternative party out there, in Charles Kennedy's language, and I'm going to vote Liberal Democrat. And I think when we see the detailed results, as we will in a moment, we'll see that the Liberal Democrats have done very well indeed compared with what they've done in the past.
Let's just have a quick look at the figures from Houghton and Washington East, which we've got here. There's the raw vote, majority of 16,000, and we saw Fraser Kemp there. And this is the share and the change. The share, and let's look at the change. 9% down for Labour, 6% up for the Liberal Democrats. Tories down 1% there.
You see, it's very clear, not an awful lot of people swinging to the Conservatives, rather simply going somewhere else, leaving home but not moving next door.
Swing from Labour to Lib Dem of 7%.
Exactly. But I think we have to establish that these seats are not typical. They give you a general pointer, but no more than that.
All right, let's join Jeremy again. Jeremy.
Yes, well, we've got company now, I think, in the form of Dr. John Reid, who's joining us from Glasgow. Dr. Reid, why do you think people are so much less enthusiastic about you this time round?
Me personally, Jeremy, or
I wouldn't dream of making such a suggestion about you, but no, about your party.
Right. Look, as everyone else has been saying, it's pretty early to make any generalisations from it, but if the exit poll was accurate, the only indicators really we could take out of it is not the extrapolation into seats, because there's a whole range of number of seats could come from those figures, but first of all, that if it does mean that Labour has got a third successive term with Tony Blair as its leader, it's never been done before, it's historic, and indeed, as I think Michael Portillo has said tonight, if it's anything like the result you're predicting, it is even more successful than Margaret Thatcher.
But it just could have been a whole lot more impressive had you not been encumbered with this particular leader.
If we hadn't been encumbered with the difficult decisions of government, no doubt we would have 100% support Jeremy, but being in government, we have to make difficult decisions, and I actually think that given the scrutiny that's been placed on Tony Blair, and I would think some unfair traducing of his character as well, that the sort of figures, the ballpark we're talking about is I think, hugely successful. And certainly to have got a third term, if that is the case, with a working majority. No Labour Prime Minister has done this before. And the only other thing I would say, again with all the usual caveats, is that it looks as though 8 years after the biggest ever electoral defeat, the Conservatives have hardly moved.
All right,
now,
well,
that may change.
Yeah, I think we'll hear from a Conservative, because we're joined now here in the studio by Boris Johnson. Lamentable, isn't it? Lamentable.
What's lamentable, Jeremy?
That you go down to a third election defeat, if any of these early indications are right.
Well, let me make a generalisation. Since nobody else has got the guts to make any generalisations or early predictions tonight, let me say straight away that I think I'm going to declare that this election is not a landslide for Tony Blair. This is the first time in 3 elections we haven't got a landslide for Labour. I'm not going to say how much reduced the Labour majority is, but they are clearly going to have a reduced
majority. So you're conceding defeat,
and
Boris?
I'm not conceding defeat, but it's perfectly obvious. Nothing illogical what I said. Concede
if he
a
wins
Labour
by several
victory.
dozen, that's a victory for you,
But
is it?
It is a wonderful thing that the British public
What do you mean it's a
not
wonderful
given this guy a landslide. About time he didn't have a landslide. He had 2 landslides in a row. And
this is the most pathetic argument I've ever heard.
It's not, because what we are now seeing, I think, is the slow, sad political extinction of Tony Blair. And however big this majority is, your exit poll puts it at
12 years
66,
in government is a slow extinction, is it?
He will. I think it'll be quicker than that. It'll be far quicker than that, because he has ranged behind him a lot of very embittered Labour backbenchers, consumed with self-loathing about the war they supported in Iraq, and they will turn on him, and they will use Gordon Brown. They will use Gordon Brown as their utensil of revenge.
No, it's making sense now. The second half was good.
The second half was good.
He says it's not going to be a landslide, like Linton Crosby, who we heard from earlier, saying they might win 50 seats. The Tories appear to accept they've lost this election. You said to John...
I didn't say that.
We said not a landslide. I took that to mean that it wasn't exactly going to be a successful...
That admits the possibility that it could be a Tory landslide.
It does, but it seems to
You
be very
spend all
unlikely.
your energy attacking the Tories, and this lot are sneaking up behind.
We don't know that yet.
Instead of putting up pictures of Michael Howard, you should have been looking at Charles Kennedy.
The still small voice of calm would point out that we're the only ones that are actually doing better.
Well, we don't know that
Somebody
yet.
come in with another piece of paper to tell you that.
Yes, of course. And it'll be proved right.
Yeah.
You wait.
There is a serious point in all of this, though, Charles
You're keeping
Faulkner.
well disguised, Jeremy.
No, I'm looking at the first edition here of The Times tomorrow morning. It was far too early for them to know any results. Fears over postal votes dog election to the end. This is going to be the first general election in modern history where there are serious doubts over the result. and that is a consequence of what you did to the voting process in this country.
Supported by all of the parties.
But you were the government. Oh, come on. You were the government.
Get the facts right. For
I have got the facts right. Who was in government? I'm sorry, I thought it was you.
The Liberal Democrats, the Tories strongly supported the idea of it.
Wait, let me finish. You had the chance to put in the checks on the thing, and you didn't.
You both supported it very, very strongly.
Why is it such an appalling error?
It's not an appalling error.
Of course it's an error. The judge said it was a banana republic.
It would disgrace a banana republic, he said.
Can I have a go?
Have a go, whoever you like, go on.
We specifically put down a private notice question on March 22nd.
Oh, surely.
It's true. I've got the bloody thing in my handbag.
To defend the principle of not putting any checks
Let
in
me
place.
finish. We specifically asked the government what steps it was going to take to protect the postal vote from fraud. That PNQ was dismissed the same day on the grounds it wasn't urgent. It wasn't urgent on March the 22nd
And
with an election in May.
Furthermore, you ignored the repeated requests of returning officers that they be given more time and they be given other precautions to ensure that the system wasn't abused. And you failed to let them.
Jeremy, they were given more money. The Tories and the Liberal Democrats and Labour all agree we want to increase turnout. We all agreed in the year 2000 that we should increase the number of people who could vote.
Oh, so it's everybody else's fault but the government's, is it?
The net result is... We need to learn the lessons. We need to learn what the Electoral Commission is saying.
But you were told
the result is... Can I just make a point?
You were told by the returning officers. You were told by a judge in Birmingham who said it would...
Before what?
We all said
Before this election.
We can't change the law between the 26th of March and the 5th of May.
You managed to change all the arrangements
not have the election. There was no necessity to have a general election. You could have got the system correct.
Everybody would have agreed that
could
the
have
right
had
thing
it
to do was to go
separately
ahead.
counted, and you know you could.
You are, if I may say so, speaking much too alarmistly. The Electoral Reform Society, the Electoral
You
Commission,
haven't the faintest idea.
all say that there is no threat to the integrity of this election.
I'm sorry, this disgraceful shouting match has got to come to a stop. David Dimbleby, raise the tone a bit.
You'll have to learn to control these things, Jeremy. I mean, we can't just have a bun fight. Now,
I agree, it's shocking.
Yeah, I tell you something really interesting, though, about postal votes you were talking about. The returning officer for Birmingham, and you know that a lot of places now, when you register to vote, you can tick a box if you want a postal vote. And the returning officer for Birmingham says that out of nearly 60,000 postal votes that were applied for, 20,000 haven't been used. He says he thinks he's deterred fraud, but can't explain what's happened to the missing 20,000 votes. So apart from anything else, this postal vote thing is proving an extremely expensive waste of money. Jeff Hoon, the Defence Secretary, arrived a moment ago at his count at Ashfield. Hardly seen at all during this campaign, the invisible man of this campaign, for fairly obvious reasons, maybe connected with Iraq, and said by some to be, or rumoured to be, wanting to stand down, but when that rumour was put about, he denied it, didn't he?
He's got these disobliging friends who went around saying Jeff Hoon wants to stand aside.
Well, people looking...
He popped up and said, no,
people looking
I'd like to stay.
People looking for a place for their friends.
Right. Yeah.
OK, so, Peter, let's go back to you.
Well, David, yes, let me remind you again that this is a three-party battle. Here's our three-party battleground. I've explained already about the Conservative-Labour battle here in the foreground, but let's swing it round now and look at the other part of it. This is the Liberal Democrat Conservative battleground. Look how close they are to the front line. The closer you are to the battlefront here, the lines in the middle of our battleground, the more vulnerable, the lower the majority of these MPs. Look at this one. This is Oliver Letwin. 1,200 is majority in Dorset West. Let's just have a look now at the swingometer that tells the story of that battlefront. Here it is, the Conservative Liberal Democrat swingometer. Now, any swing along here on the Liberal Democrat front here, knocking out these blue Conservative MPs, Oliver Letwin. Just look at this, Oliver Letwin, Tim Collins, David Davis, Theresa May, Michael Howard himself. Any swing up there is very dangerous for the Conservatives. Any swing this way, of course, changes these Liberal Democrat MPs to blue. But now, turn the battlefront around again, and the battleground now shows us the third element in this three-party fight. This time, the Liberal Democrats here and Labour here. And notice how very sparse for the Liberal Democrats the front line of Labour is. Cardiff Central, Shirley Williams referring to, is right in the front line. That's the front one of all. But otherwise, there's not that much there for the Liberal Democrats, and for the Labour Party fighting them does Chesterfield there. So this is the battlefront the Liberal Democrats would like to bring alive, and here is how they're going to do it. Here is Charles Clarke, 9,000 his majority back there in Norwich South. Not that invulnerable the way things are going by the sound of it. Let's bring our swingometer down now that shows the Liberal Democrat Labour battleground. There's Charles Clarke flying up there on the left. You can see him sticking out there rather large, deliberately kept him big so you can see him. And here we have now this battleground, this swingometer. And here we see, look, 51 Liberal Democrat MPs at the moment. Now, very sparse territory here for Labour inside Liberal Democrat territory. Not much here for the Liberal Democrats inside Labour territory. That's Cardiff Central, very, very close to the line. That really should go down. To get Charles Clarke, it would take a staggering 12% swing over there, and Charles Clarke would go down to the Liberal Democrats. But not entirely impossible that some of these Labour MPs will go down on the way the Liberal Democrats are performing against them in some of these seats. David.
Peter, thanks. Well, this idea of decapitation, or you could call it decimation of the Tory leadership by the Liberal Democrats, included, as Peter was saying, Oliver Letwin as Shadow Chancellor, and David Davis, the Shadow Home Secretary, Houghton and Alton, Price and Howden, Theresa May, Shadow Secretary for the Family, and Tim Collins. They were all people that the Liberal Democrats were after. And let's just find out how those battles have been going on. First of all, in Dorset West, Jenny Scott has been following Oliver Letwin's campaign. Jenny, good evening. Is he going to be for the chop, do you think, or has he survived?
Well, they tell me that things are very close here, but I have to say that is purely speculation at this stage. Not all the ballot boxes are in yet. This is a very disparate constituency. It's large, it's very rural. But at the moment, Oliver Letwin has this majority of 1,414 over the Liberal Democrats. As you said, it's part of their decapitation strategy to take some top Tory scalps. Justine McGuinness is the Liberal Democrat challenger here, and they say that the campaign has been going well. She's been campaigning a lot on national issues as opposed to local issues. We're going to have to wait some time, though, to see whether or not they've made any headway. Don't forget that this constituency has always been Tory in living memory, so it would be quite an upset, not just because there's potential of a top Tory scalp, but also because it could go Liberal Democrat for the first time.
Seen anything of Oliver Letwin this evening? Have you seen anything of Oliver Letwin today?
He's not here yet, no. He's expected here at around midnight. I'm told from the Liberal Democrats they're playing a bit more of a tactical game, and Justine McGuinness isn't due here until just before the declaration, which we're expecting around about 3 o'clock in the morning, between 3:30, something like that.
And of course you have an intervention by UKIP there, don't you, as well, that may make things tricky.
Yes, they are standing here along with the Greens as well. There's been a lot of talk of tactical voting in this constituency, a lot of talk of trying to squeeze the 8,000 or so votes that Labour got last time, and to try and shave a few thousand of those off onto the Liberal Democrats, because of course that's all it would take to see Oliver Letwin go.
Jenny, thanks very much indeed. Let's go to Holton Price and Howden and join Margaret Gilmore, who's been following David Davis's fate. Margaret.
Well, a very high turnout here, nearly 70%, which is much higher than last time round. Now, this was always going to be a two-horse race. Labour was never expected to perform particularly well, but the Labour candidate has told us he feels particularly bruised and he may even lose his deposit. And he thinks that he has lost out big time to tactical voting, with the Labour vote being transferred to the Lib Dems. Now, in this marginal seat, that means that this could indeed be very tight here. It's early days yet. All the big ballot boxes are not yet in. David Davis's camp, the Conservatives, are still quietly optimistic that they are going to do it, even though they admit that it could be tight at this stage. What's interesting is that some of them seem surprisingly subdued. Of course, some of them were hoping that he could be the next Conservative leader, and if the Conservatives perform better than expected tonight, then that will become less of an issue.
Oh, what, so they're already sad because they don't think David Davis is going to go into the leadership of the Tory party because the Tory party's done too well. It's a twist. But tell me one other thing. Wasn't there another David Davis on the ballot paper, and has that confused things?
Well, no, he pulled out earlier, but that was a really, really big worry, because if there had been another David Davis standing, then that really could have made this very, very difficult for the Conservatives, who have a majority of just under 2,000, especially as we're hearing tonight with this tactical voting. But I have to say, it's very early days yet. We still don't know. David Davis himself, quite interesting, is not going to give any big interviews, we're told tonight. He's not going to be talking about leadership or immigration or anything like that. He's going to turn up at about 2:30, just before the declaration. He is hoping that he'll be giving that victory speech, but he's going to be perhaps surprisingly quiet.
Thanks very much, Margaret. Well, we go to Maidenhead now and join Jane Hill, who's been following Theresa May. She's another of the potential decapitees at the hands of the Liberal Democrats. And Jane, what's your impression of how she's done?
She is indeed, and in fact, in the last few minutes, Theresa May's camp has been telling us that they are feeling confident. That's the word they're using, and they're saying this is going to be very interesting to see where this leaves the Liberal Democrats' decapitation strategy, as it's become known. Now, this seat is number 16 on the Lib Dems' target list of target seats. Theresa May, former Tory party chairman, of course, defending a majority of 3,284. Now, Catherine Newbound, the Liberal Democrat, would need a swing of 3.8% to take the scalp of Theresa May. But as we've been hearing from the exit poll over the course of the evening, if that is right, of course, the big if we are looking nationally at a Lib Dem swing of about 3%, then that is not enough for the Liberal Democrats to take Theresa May out of the seat here in Maidenhead in Berkshire.
And of course, you've got the count for Windsor as well, haven't you, with the black Tory candidate who, if he wins, which it seems likely he may, Adama Freer, will be the first black MP in the House of Commons representing the Conservative Party.
Absolutely right. Yes, a rock-solid Conservative seat, I have to say. They're counting the Windsor seat behind me. We get two for the price of one here tonight. They've been going strong since about 10:20. We think we'll get the result at around about 1:30. But absolutely a majority of getting on for 9,000. The seat was held by Michael Trend for the Conservatives. You might remember he's not standing. A bit of a to-do over some rather large sum of expenses. But Adama Freer, a very impressive candidate, very dapper, 39-year-old, self-made millionaire, made his money in the IT business and has been living here in the constituency of Windsor since, well, for the last 20 months since he was selected for this seat. And it's very, very interesting. He will indeed, almost certainly, he will be the Conservatives' first black MP. Not something he says he wants to talk too much about. He's got plenty of other issues to talk about, he says.
Thank you very much indeed, Jane. Well, we'll come back to you later on, and particularly for the Theresa May declaration. We're expecting a result next, the 4th, from Scotland, from Rutherglen and Hamilton West, a very safe Labour seat just to the south of Glasgow. But again, it'll give us an indication of what's going on in Scotland. The Scottish National Party was in second place on the apparent result from last time. These are one of the constituencies that have been changed all round. Well, now we join Michael Crick. He's out and about in a very important part of London that gets much mocked for its backing for the Labour Party, Islington. Michael.
I'm in the King's Head Theatre pub in Upper Street in Islington, and I suppose Islington is in many ways the home of New Labour. It used to be where Tony Blair lived before he went to Downing Street, and it's just round the corner from here that Tony Blair and Gordon Brown had their famous pact 11 years ago, whereby it was agreed that Mr Blair would run for the Labour leadership. Two seats here, Islington South where we are now, a Lib Dem target. Used to be Chris Smith's seat, but he's just retired, and Islington North next door, held by the Labour left-winger Jeremy Corbyn. Well, let me ask these two ladies here, how do you vote today?
Liberal Democrats.
Liberal Democrat. And do you normally vote for them?
Well, I never voted before. I'm only 21, so...
Was that an easy choice for you?
It was more a process of elimination, actually.
And who were you eliminating?
Well, the main party is Conservative, Labour.
And what about you?
Hi,
I wanted to vote Liberal Democrat, but went for Labour as a protest against Conservative because I was quite worried they'd get into power and didn't want them to.
So you were more comfortable with Liberal Democrat policies, but you
Yeah.
felt that if you went for them, then it would help
more
get the
chance,
Conservative in.
yeah.
Right. Whereas that's a bit rough on the Liberal Democrats, though, isn't it?
Well, I think in a few years they'll have a better chance. I don't think three-way party politics is quite there yet. I think it's still mainly between Conservative and Labour.
Okay, thanks
They're
very
on the
much
way.
indeed. Thank you. Excuse me, sir. Did you? We're from the BBC. Did you vote today?
I did, certainly.
Can you tell us who you voted for?
Labour.
And was that an easy choice for you?
Very easy choice for me, yes. Because even though everyone's negative against the Iraqi war, the country as a whole has been doing very well, the economy's been doing very good, so that's what persuaded me to make that decision.
Right, but did you think about it for a while?
Not really, no. I think it's a clear choice for myself.
Okay, thanks very
Okay,
much
thank
indeed.
you.
Can I ask you who you voted for today?
I'm not telling.
You're not telling?
No. as
Give
far
us
as
a
I'm
give us a clue.
No, I'm afraid, as far as I'm concerned, that's my business.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Can I come to you over here? We're from the BBC. Did you vote today?
I didn't.
You didn't
Laura
vote?
did. I did, yeah.
Who did you vote for?
I voted Labour.
And did you take a long time to make your mind up on that, or was it?
I did, yeah. It was quite difficult because
What was the alternative in your mind?
the alternative was a protest vote, but I don't believe a protest vote would have very much effect. So,
Who would the protest vote have gone to, perhaps?
perhaps Green in the constituency that I live in, but I couldn't stand to see the Conservatives get in, so I had to vote Labour, but it was with a heavy heart.
Now, you didn't vote today, I believe. So,
I didn't.
Why was that?
To be completely honest, mainly just because I didn't get myself into gear and register in time. I probably would have.
So who would you have voted for if you had voted?
I probably would have gone with the Greens, to be honest.
With the Greens, right.
Yeah.
And have you normally voted Green in the past?
I haven't actually voted before.
Right.
This would have been my first time.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Anyway, that's it from the King's Head Theatre Pub here in Islington. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Michael. A couple of bits of news. Slough. Slough is 280 on the Tory target list, but the postal votes are showing them the Conservatives neck and neck with Labour. The other thing is the count in Keighley has been delayed. That's Anne Cryer's seat, or was last time round, because of rows over the postal votes and apparently some issues of security. I'm not quite sure what. And Jack Straw is just turning up at his count in Blackburn, the Foreign Secretary, with a constituency with a large Muslim community, and it will be very interesting to see whether he is punished for the Iraq war. He's going to be talking to James Robbins up there, or indeed is. I don't know whether we can hear what they're saying. Apparently not. It's an informal chat. But he'd need an 11.5% swing to the Tories. Just 1 point on turnout. And we go to Rutherglen.
People are talking about high turnout, queues outside polling stations and so on. All the indications are so far that turnout is up a little bit, maybe over 60%, but still, this would be one of the lowest turnouts since the First World War in 1918.
We have the result from Rutherglen and Hamilton West.
UK parliamentary constituency. The number of votes for each candidate is as follows. William Bonner, Scottish Socialist Party, 1,164. Peter Ian Charles Crerar, Scottish